is snowing lightly here in Reno, and we actually have a nice view of the city. You can see lots of white out there. You can see behind me here on Lake Tahoe at Incline Beach. This is actually part of the barge that capsized last night. It was holding all of the fireworks for the 4th of July fireworks show. That show has since been canceled. We've watched over the past half hour as the fire, you can see it behind me, has moved over the hill and onto closer to the ground there. Come with me as we take a look at this line. It does snake around, goes pretty long, not nearly as long as it was earlier. Now the site manager here tells me that one of the reasons why this location is taking such a long time is because a lot of these college students in line are first-time voters. Even now, over 12 hours later, still an active scene. You might be able to see in the distance those police lights behind me. They are still here processing the scene. Now at around 7:25 this morning, that's when the shooter came and opened fire over in the valet and parking area. The bill would allow a physician or an advanced practice registered nurse to prescribe a medication that's designed to end the life of a patient under certain circumstances. That's not the slough. That's actually just a flooded roadway. Now, this is one of the few that's left standing as a result of the fires. Crews just began a couple minutes ago. You can probably hear some of these engines of the cars. They're still rolling out. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Sophie Lincoln. Well, in Stagecoach, a 5-person armed robbery ring busted by the Lyon County Sheriff's Office, but only 3 of those 5 subjects arrested and booked, while the last 2 are still at large. Clear skies with temperatures in the 80s throughout the week, but a red flag warning is in effect for this evening. Let's check in now with forecaster Anthony Ramos with more on the weather. Hi again, Anthony. All right, well, this week, Vitalant teams up with local first responders for a Battle of the Badges at Greater Nevada Fields to see which local agency can get the most people to donate blood. And Anthony, you mentioned next week it's going to be cooler, might be a perfect opportunity to participate in that. Let's take one final look at your forecast. All right, well, that's it for our primetime special. We'll see you back here for News 4 at 11. Pam Barrick, who lives in South Reno, has acted in the role of full-time caregiver for her 23-year-old son Carson, who has several disabilities, including cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and autism, among others.
It's not that he asked for this. This is something that was unexpected, happened at birth, and we will be his caregivers for the rest of our lives.
While Barrick's husband's insurance covers some of Carson's treatments, the family relies on Medicaid and government funding to cover any copays, as well as for Pam's shared living provider income and Carson's Social Security income and benefits. Barrick says there is no backup plan should they lose their Medicaid.
It's scary. There's no what-if situations. We would just continue doing what we're doing, and it would be very, very, very difficult.
For Danielle Vega, whose son Aiden requires full-time medical care, the situation is equally dire. Aiden lives full-time at a skilled learning facility and receives all of his medication and day-to-day living expenses through Medicaid.
My son is a human being, and I live in the United States of America, where it's a first world country where I would expect that our most vulnerable population, being our disabled and our elderly, would be taken care of.
Unlike Carson and Aiden, Connor Fogel cares for himself, but he also relies heavily on Medicaid for his treatments and medications.
I'm afraid that I'll get sick and die, because they gave people everything.
For these 3, it's now a waiting game to see what the government does with Medicaid and if there will be any protections in place. Reporting in Reno, Sophie Lincoln. A little more than an hour north of Winnemucca, right on the Nevada-Oregon border, work is currently underway on what will be the largest production of lithium on the planet, according to VP of Government and External Affairs at Lithium Americas, Tim Crowley.
It'll take us about 40 years to mine. So it's a very small area, but it's concentrated very well, and it's going to be one of the most productive lithium outputs in the world.
The lithium used in cell phones, electric car batteries, and more comes from the McDermott caldera, which was formed 16 million years ago after a massive supervolcano eruption.
We'll break down the clays and liberate the lithium and other minerals from the clay.
But the project has not been free of criticism, and there are still some groups who do not accept the project even now that it's underway.
We call it Pihimuhu, means rotten moon.
Lithium Americas has reached an agreement with the Fort McDermott, Paiute, and Shoshone tribe, but some indigenous people maintain that the site is a sacred one because they say more than 24 of their ancestors were massacred near there in the late 1800s.
That's our ancestral homeland, whether it's, by title or broken treaty or just, it's just land that we have always stewarded.
A federal judge ended up ruling against the tribes who brought forward a lawsuit to prevent the project from going forward a couple of years ago, but a handful of tribal members say they will continue to oppose the project, if only symbolically.
As a spiritual man, spiritual people, we're going to stand up and oppose. There may be a handful of us, but we will continue to oppose.
In the meantime, Mayor of Winnemucca, Richard Stone, says he's excited for the potential economic growth it will bring to the rural community.
It's been about the same size for a lot of years, and for us to grow, it would be best tax base wise and for the community to bring other businesses and opportunities to the area.
Construction is currently underway and is expected to take 3 years before it's a fully functioning mine. There have been other attempts to prevent the project from going forward, including from conservation groups, but none have made it in court, and the project is moving ahead. Reporting in Reno, Sophie Lincoln.
Well, big day at Lake Tahoe today. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg spoke at the 28th Annual Lake Tahoe Summit. News 4 Sophie Lincoln got an exclusive 2-on-1 interview with Buttigieg and Senator Catherine Cortez Masto about some key projects coming to this region.
This year's Lake Tahoe Summit was all about transportation, with U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg detailing a number of projects coming to the Lake Tahoe Basin that will increase connectivity. One of those projects is on Tahoe's eastern shore. For decades, the Lake Tahoe community has prioritized preserving the one-of-a-kind natural environment there. But as it becomes a more popular spot for tourism, officials are facing new challenges to accommodate the ever-increasing number of visitors.
We have over the years worked so hard to protect the ecosystem in the surrounding regions, but one of the things that we have to really focus on is the transit and the trails.
It was recently announced that $24 million will go toward road safety and trail improvements on State Route 28. That funding comes from a federal grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says while these efforts may be transportation-based, that isn't to say that they won't be environmentally friendly. So they think of transportation with pollution and gas emissions, and then that goes against the environment. How would you kind of respond to that, and what are the ways that you are able to make it work like today?
When I go through the data showing that transportation is the biggest source of carbon pollution and emissions in our economy, I take that as a challenge to make transportation the biggest part of the solution.
Buttigieg says electric buses, increased trails for walking and biking, and other projects are part of that solution. The goal is to increase safety and create more jobs by funding projects like this one. Reporting from Lake Tahoe, Sophie Lincoln.